Perfect. So I believe we're kind of getting up there. So I'll go ahead and kick us off, and hopefully people can join us as they get connected. So thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Megan Elwood. I am the Business Development Manager here at Strategies Group. And as many of you know, this is going to be a series. So this is kind of part one of our 5-episode series of really kind of covering all things in construction and what that looks like in the technology world. And so today we're going to be talking about, as you guys can see, today's agenda, finding and securing profitable work. And I'm not going to run through the bullets that you see there, but those are the main things that we will be hitting on. And Pat Chappell, who I'll introduce here in a moment, will be taking us through the presentation. Just a reminder, obviously, I'm sure y'all have been on 1,000 different Zoom calls, but as you do have questions, throw them into the Q&A, the chat. I'll be kind of moderating that throughout. And if you can't think of a question, I'm sure we will have our contact information posted somewhere. So reach out, ask us anything. I'm pretty sure Pat and myself have probably been asked most of it. So with that being said, the moderator will be Pat Chappell. And upon graduating from Clemson in 1975, Pat actually started his career in real estate in construction, originally founding the Strategies Group in 1984. As one of the first Timberline, now Sage partners, additional partnerships with Dexter and Chaney, Viewpoint and Acumatica Strategies over 2,000 construction-focused companies, and we help find solutions to help them significantly increase their bottom lines and ultimately build equity within their business. So with that being said, I will throw it over to Pat and we'll get started.
Well, hello, everybody. I hope you have the lobster thermidor or something good from the lunch and learn today. And hopefully I won't upset your stomach while you're eating, but we'll try to enjoy the food and maybe a little bit of conversation. So I'm just going to get us started. I'm not quite as old as Congo Gumi, but I'm getting up there. Actually, Congo Gumi is actually the oldest company in the world, the oldest continuing operating company in the world. And they got their start building temples and shrines in Japan. So kind of an interesting thing that the oldest company in the world is a construction company. It's also interesting to say that the issues that they faced are still the same. And I think we can all agree that really, after we look at these, the economy sort of dictates the order. So let's talk about the things that we do. And these first two will be relevant to today and then others into the continuing series. But obviously, we need to develop and maintain good client relationships, especially as a subcontractor. You're going to have relationships with owners and general contractors and construction managers. You may be prime on some, you may work for others. So we've got to develop those relationships, and that actually helps us find and secure additional work. And what we're going to try to do is focus on profitability and where do we find that work as we go along. Otherwise, we've got to safely deliver the product, and we'd like to do that on time and on budget and maybe make a profit while we're at it. Realizing an on-target profit or more is really the goal. And then we have to keep talent. We got to find talent. It's maybe a little bit easier right now than it was before the pandemic, but it has its own problems. So finding and keeping the best talent is something that we've been hearing now for years, and it's certainly a challenge, as well as limiting our risk with the government and personnel, as well as corporate and project risk that we are concerned about. We all want to do this with the lowest FTE count and the lowest operational costs for infrastructure that we can. And especially with the service-oriented companies that might be on the phone today. And by the way, there's quite a broad, there are like 40 attendees, and they cover everything from HVAC to glass to steel to concrete. So there's quite a large group of attendees today, and they're diverse. Some of those opportunities for some of those attendees may manifest themselves as some kind of service work or inspection work. So that's something that we really want to focus on as well. So, but before we get started, there's some things that are still kind of surprising out there. There's a British firm, this Wellington Group, that's done an international survey, and across the world, still about over 30% of the projects that are ongoing are being flown by the seat of their pants. So there's no repeatable baseline for cost or resources or schedules. And that means that I think we're working in our business a lot, but we're maybe not working on our business, which, you know, I don't know if you're in that situation. Maybe that's why you're on here today. I hope this doesn't sound familiar, but if it does, not all is lost, and we can figure out ways to help you to do that. We all are facing a lot of challenges right now, even before COVID. You know, what we do is hard. The money's not always there, neither are the resources all the time. And when they are, they're often tough to manage. And I think that when we combine that with the whole idea that every job is a work of art, it certainly causes and presents some challenges for us. I'm hoping that not every job is a work of art for you, that there are ways that we can build baselines and establish tracks to run on, if you will. But that's all dependent on your motivation and your understanding of your actual costs. So we'll talk a little bit about actual cost as well. Other things that present issues are lack of communication between the field and the office. Again, we don't always have standardized practices, or we don't leverage best practices, or even if we do, maybe we don't enforce them because they take too much people power. So one of the advantages of some of the more modern tools are that there are ways to leverage without as many people, and also to make sure that we can replace some of these older mission critical systems that are manual or electronic, but maybe don't have the functionality that we need to continue to reinforce what we do based on our own workflows and best practices and standard procedures. And then, of course, I think the big issue for most of us, if we've been around for a while, is that we got a lot of systems out there that really don't talk to each other. So this isn't just an issue for subcontractors. This is also an issue for GCs and construction managers and others. And I was still surprised to see that the average project manager and field superintendent has 8 different construction apps on their phone. They can go to the store, the App Store, the Google Store. They can download a free app. A lot of them, those are free. That's a business model for some of the vendors out there, to give a free use. And then after a while, all of a sudden you got 25 project managers using it, and you get a call from the sales guy that says, hey, you know, you've got 25 users of our software on there. You know, maybe we ought to be talking about price benefits and other ways to leverage what you're already spending. But since those 8 apps don't talk to each other, that presents additional problems. The good news is there are lots of solutions available out there. Strategies Group has had the opportunity to work, as Megan said earlier, with Sage, with Dexter and Cheney, with Viewpoint. We're very familiar with many of the other solutions out there, and there's some very good web-based solutions that are great, that can alleviate a lot of these problems. So, you know, when the internet came along and it made it possible for us to work pretty much from anywhere, then came the Apple phone that taught everybody how to use the computer, essentially. So we had people that didn't want to touch a computer years ago when we first started doing this, that basically have their self-taught on their iPhone or their Android device. The key is capturing all that information in a single database, which is what these modern cloud solutions allow you to do. And it covers the range of everything from estimating to service management. And we're going to be talking about estimating and sales management some today. And in the future, happy to talk about inventory and project management, payroll, and all the other things that make this up. So what's the blueprint? How do we get to this point where we can establish, you know, some baselines for our company? And it's really pretty simple. In the pre-construction part of the work that we're going to talk about today, really it kind of starts with defining your ideal job. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Then taking that ideal job and finding more of them. So looking at some technologies that can help us leverage that. And then, of course, we've got to estimate and bid the work appropriately. So we're going to focus on that mostly today. Later on, and you can't do without this, the back end of this, the post-construction piece, and during construction, where we plan the work, perform it, and analyze it, and repeat it. That's where we start to figure out that we can do some things. We can come up with some standard methodologies. We can use actual cost information from as-built jobs and things that have been commissioned or closed out to help drive pricing on the front end, so that we at least have a sanity check when we're starting to initially review what new work we might be going after. So let's talk a little bit about defining the ideal job. What I recommend that you do, and our most successful guys do this more than once a year, but we would suggest to you that you find 3 jobs that you've been successful on, and you do a really detailed analysis of that work. And there are questions that you need to ask yourself. How did we get it? That might seem pretty easy. If you don't do anything but work for general contractors, then you know that's pretty obvious. But are you working with the same guys? Are there people that you would like to work with more? That kind of thing. But how did we get the work? And if it did come through an owner, a GC, or a CM, do I really want to work with them again? I mean, I think we all have, and there's a word to, there's an income to hassle factor involved in all of our work. And sometimes, if you really got to do it because you need the cash, maybe you're going to take a little bit more stress from the payor than you would if you've got a really nice backlog in a fat pipeline. So how can we do that? How can we empower ourselves by having enough work to not have to say yes to every job that comes down the pipe? What were our actual costs? Believe it or not, we find there's very little detail other than looking at overall numbers on projects that really are costing people a lot of money on the next job that they get. Not knowing your actual costs, and I'm not just talking about what's on the job and what the variances were against our estimate, but I'm also talking about non-job related expenses, G&A expenses that go to running the business. We need to know what those gross margin and net gross margin dollars really are, because we may find that if we do this analysis, that things we don't think we're really making much money on, we do better than we thought, and things that we think we make money on, we don't really do as well as we had hoped. So is that information we need to have? Absolutely. So we need to spend some time on evaluating what our actual costs were and where was the overspend or underspend versus our estimate. Then we can look at some operational stuff. What were the bottlenecks? What did we experience that delayed the project or caused increased hassle? And what was their impact? What was the cause of that? And if we, on the flip side, did better than expected, why? What reasons why? And can we repeat it? So again, if we kind of take the idea that every job is not a work of art, but it has some nuance to it, there should be baselines and processes and procedures that we could do, that we can replicate, we can measure, and then we can scale. So that's sort of the idea behind this whole idea, is we want to scale, we want to be able to do something consistently. That's why we want to find out about what's bad and what's good. And then once we know that, what's our company story? I feel like today that people really want to hear us. They want us to be good storytellers. They want us to understand, what makes us unique. As a subcontractor, can I bring something to the job that's not just the lowest price? Can I prove that I'm more reliable? Can I prove that I'm more innovative? Do I have some techniques that I can employ that the general contractor and the owner can really use? Maybe I assemble components, in a controlled environment and then implement them so that there's less hassle on the job site. So there's just a lot of things that make your individual businesses successful. And I think you kind of need to have an evangelist. It's often the owner, but it might be somebody else. Everybody in your company should be able to talk to somebody outside that might represent a job opportunity and tell the company story. So let's talk about that now. So let's assume that we've figured out what our costs are. We've come up with our company story. We know where we're going to go. We know what our best jobs look like. So now then, where do we find this work? And I think that a lot of this won't be new, but maybe reinforcing some of the ideas behind it and reminding you of where these sources are may be helpful. Well, the most obvious one is visiting existing clients. Now, COVID's keeping us from visiting like we used to, but I cannot overemphasize the need for us to go out and call on our clients. It's not just, sending them the bill. It's not just sending them the invoice. It's not just a fruit basket at Christmas time, but you having a purpose to go out and meet with one of your constituents and talk to them about new things that you guys are seeing, how you're innovating, within the electrical field, or what new technologies like self-healing concrete can do. I mean, there's just 1,000 things that you can come up with that's going to differentiate you from your competitors. So going out and visiting with clients, obviously being shortlisted or negotiated where there's nothing competing with, no competition required is kind of the holy grail. And how do we do that? There are also other sources out there, and some of you may have looked at these before. I certainly encourage you to look at them again. Really doesn't matter which, all of them have some of the same functionality. Dodge is the one that's been out there the longest. Bid Clerk has a big following. Construction Market Daily, I Square Foot. All of these have functionality that are very easy to use and inexpensive relative to what you get. And I'm just going to show you very quickly what a screen might look like. So this is an initial search screen, and this is actually from Bid Clerk. This particular product has really good search functionality. So you can decide on this left-hand side of the screen what it is that you want to look at. You can really dive deep. You can make it based on a range of CSI numbers. You can make it based on keyword searches. You can make it based on volume of jobs, the type of work. All of that information is controlled. And once you pick these criteria on the left, it'll return a list of jobs that are bidding, for example, maybe in your area. And so you see a syllabus here of what that job is, what the plans look like, what's the overall project value, et cetera, et cetera. Probably more important than that is once you understand what you want to look at is the ability to get what? I mean, we all have to have it now. What's one of the hardest things to do is to get legitimate email addresses. So I think that the whole idea that these services have done a really good job of scrubbing the databases to give you email information, and then relative to how the project is going to be run, owner information, competitive bidders, who are the other people around the project that are important to us. And every one of these people are important to us for a selected job, but they might be important, even more important to us for jobs going forward. So just because an engineer is selected on this job doesn't mean he might not know of other work that's going on, other vendors that you work with, suppliers. They know what work is going on. So your radar should be open all the time or radar should be up for being able to remember and extend your circle of influence if you can. From here, you can drill down into the specs. So maybe it looks good at a very high level, but you want more detail. In this particular case, I just did a keyword search of all things around lightning protection. And it's now allowed me to drill all the way down into the detail of the project that's being bid. I can click and get the specifications for that project. So I can really look down into it and see if it makes sense for things that I do. And even to the extent of being able to retrieve PDF documents that you'll see we're going to use later when we talk about some estimating. But all of that information is available in each one of the planned services that we've looked at, or the lead services that we've looked at, including private work. So a lot of those lead sources not only handle public work, but they also have private work in their databases as well. So certainly encourage you to look into those things. Once you have them and you have some leads, we'll talk about maybe what we can do with them in just a minute. Don't just, if you do have a desire to work on government work, obviously that's a whole different set of requirements, but usually the pay frequencies are good. And a lot of that work, is long-term. So even now we have many of our contractors and subs are working on government jobs, and because they've been declared essential workers, the money's been funded and they just have to do the work. So, it's really nice to know that some of that money has been committed and it's going to be there as long as you perform. So certainly encourage our customers and our clients to look at these bid sources. Another one is just going out and thinking about, once I know what my best job is, maybe I'm great in education, maybe I'm great in multifamily, maybe I'm great in healthcare. Well, there are lots of sources, and I guarantee you not very many people are getting called on. Again, this is some COVID stuff now that we have to conform to, but once this is available, being able to get a few minutes of somebody's time, again, with something that makes you special, something you could tell your story, getting on those bid lists. A lot of these large retailers do stuff all over the country, as you know. Medical centers have always ongoing needs now with COVID and all the stuff that we're doing around these types of medical emergencies are meaning there's tons of money being spent in the medical fields. So there's just a ton of things that you can do where if you actually go out and meet with people, you're starting to build some mind share with them that may, and even architects and engineers, if you feel like you can do that. You may also want to utilize software for customer relationship management. Now, this is sort of a funny deal. For years, nobody ever thought that CRM or Salesforce automation made applied to what's going on with contractors, especially subs who felt like the majority of their work was coming from general contractors. But when you're talking about customer relationship management, those guys are your customers. You're their customers. So being able to utilize a CRM to maintain relationships with your clients, which we'll talk about in just a minute, but also to find new sources of leads and to manage that pipeline that can become part of a backlog that you'll be tracking, until the work is actually started. So a couple of the customer relationship management products that are very good out there have similar things like these dashboards that you can see here on the top line up here. We have CRM, we have a newsletter functionality, we have email marketing. All of those things are now being tied together in these construction-centric Salesforce and CRM packages. Some people use generic Salesforce and CRM products. So we all know who Salesforce is. They're the biggest one of the Salesforce automation and CRM people, but they don't necessarily have systems that are customized for doing construction, which kind of goes into the whole, an opportunity becomes a project, and how do we do that handoff and how do we set that up? So there's several that have come out that do focus on that. And then we have some friends and some people in our industry who have done significant customizations from Salesforce to make it more construction specific. So here we've got, you know, a dashboard. Here we might have a newsletter campaign functionality built into a CRM. So everybody's excited about doing a company newsletter for about 3 months. And, and then they realize how much work it is. Some of these CRM guys, and there are other services out there that can do it, that will actually write newsletters for you. So it's not that you're going to have to be responsible for the content of every newsletter that you send out. But believe it or not, the newsletter subscriptions are pretty high industry-wide. If it's a decent, you know, if it's a decent presentation and there's good content, people are looking for things, especially with COVID now. I know we're all clicking on, you know, on new websites and registering for things we haven't had time to do before. And now we are doing that more and more. So the idea that you might have the ability to have a newsletter and build a following so that the next time a job comes up and they need what you do, you move to the top of the list. Just having that, I think they call it top shelf awareness in retail, getting up to the top shelf and on the end of the aisle. That's what the idea behind a lot of these CRM solutions is all about. A lot more you can go into, but then I guess the last thing on, you know, finding the work and securing it is maybe you're big enough that you need to hire a business development person. And, you know, certainly that can be a major commitment, but it can also generate major revenues. So somebody whose whole job it usually, you know, if you're working in your business a lot, it's often the owner. If you're working on your business, then maybe I'm the owner who's working with other people within my organization to do that function so that I can focus on running the business instead of having to work for the business. So the ideas behind, you know, working for your business and working in your business are different than working on your business. And this is just an example of how you can potentially push responsibilities into other people's worlds and realize a major benefit from it. Okay, so just to recap now, we've identified our ideal job. We've looked at some ways that we can find more of those jobs. We can get on these lists and potentially, you know, and get invited to do it. And now all of a sudden we've got to handle the next piece, which is the takeoff, estimate, bid, and propose process. And we've talked a lot about processes so far, but I don't care how good your processes are or your people or how great your business is. If you're busted before you start, you got a problem. You can't recover from it. I have seen some general contractors come, and hopefully you've never been on this, but have a job bust and then have the GC come to you and ask you to cut your price because you know, they busted an estimate and you've worked with them before and you want to work with them again. So, but the whole point is it's better if you don't bust your estimate. So how do we prevent that, or what do we do to mitigate that to the extent that we can? So what we're going to talk about now is why would I want to automate these processes? And there are really several major reasons, but this is the most important piece of what I would, probably any construction business, but certainly in the pre-construction phase, is making sure that I have a system that I can repeat and that's consistent. So if I'm going to look at automating my, let's just call it the whole estimate and bid process, what am I going to get from that? What's that mean? If I invest in some estimating software, you know, what should I get? And I'll tell you, there are four major things. There are probably others, but the ones that I've seen over the years are, the first thing is I can increase my speed, efficiency, and accuracy. And I believe it or not, still the biggest estimating product on the market is Excel. And it's never going to go away. There are going to be some people who will never change it. Some people have developed spreadsheets that you're going to have to pry out of their cold, dead hands. But I can tell you that I've seen so many times where something that was in Excel that had a circular calculation or a formula was wrong or whatever really cost that construction company a lot of money. So what we're talking about are systems that can not only make you faster, and make you more efficient, but make you more accurate. We'll talk about that in just a second when we look at some products. You have a standardized process. I've seen over the years estimators that were absolutely fantastic leave and go to another company or quit or retire. That corporate knowledge, that estimating knowledge, when it walks out the door, that can be a significant impact on a company's revenue. So if I can have a system that I can, so to speak, teach how to do things in a standardized way, then not only do I retain that corporate knowledge, I can also teach other people how to do it. So you're never going to replace that unique thing about that best estimator you ever worked with, but you certainly can reduce the pain when they move on, regardless of what that would be. You also have a centralized estimate database and history. So if you need to go back, and this is going to be really important, when we know what our as-built unit costs are from our job that we've done earlier where we analyze our work, we want to be able to compare that and to our historical estimated unit costs. So when I go back and look at a new project, I can look at what I estimated old projects were against what my as-built costs were. So now I have the whole range of numbers that I can compare to that will help me decide if I even want to bid that job. And if I do, how will I, where are my opportunities to win that job? On the post-construction side, you're going to have a system now that can integrate with accounting solutions, with project management products. There may be a buyout stage that you would go through where you would need bills of materials from the estimating product to do a buyout if you have to do that. It may go into a procurement department where you have somebody that's a purchasing manager, but all that information that's already in the estimate can be used and repurposed for other things, which are really difficult to do just because of the inability to sort things and other things when you're getting ready to do your buyout process and commit costs. And then, of course, as I said a minute ago, you got a sanity check for new work. So does what I've done here line up good with the ideal job that I want to pursue? Does it look like I can do it for the numbers that I've talked about? Now, of course, we're going to take into consideration when we're doing a new job any adjustments to pricing and whatever. But as a thumbnail and as historical, track of way to keep up with new estimates based on old ones, that's really pretty crucial. So let's talk a little bit about some of the tools that are out there to take off and price accurately. So we've all had the ruler, the scale. Some of us had a rolling scale. Some of us use a digitizer. There's just all manner of takeoff tools, and a lot of the takeoff, some of the takeoff tools, actually, that's all they do. So PlanSwift, OnCenter, and eTakeoff are standalone takeoff tools that can integrate to Excel and often to other estimating products. And I differentiate the two by saying that an integrated estimating system already has takeoff integrated with it. It usually has a pre-priced database. In that database are templates for different types of work, assemblies, work packages, formulas. They're easy to update so that I can have items in multiple locations, but because I'm updating a centralized database, I can do that all in one time. Often, you'll have bidding and bid management built into the product, as well as proposal generation. So some of the ones that you all have seen before and may know, ProEst is a general contractor product. McCormick Systems has been big in electrical. Fast Pipe is for structural pipe. There's also some other ones for structural steel. Sage has been around forever. I think we did our first estimating solution with Timberline probably in about 1992, and it's still one of the best ones out there. And it does have different databases for, for other outside of the GC work. They have some electrical and mechanical, although those have some of their own nuances. Roofing takeoff systems, they have different, different types of takeoff methodologies. And then, of course, then we've got RS means, which is, as you all probably all know, is one that the government uses often for change orders. And usually the means prices are higher than what we do stuff for. So getting a job or a change order or something based on means pricing usually means we make more money. So there's a lot of tools there for not only the takeoff part, but also the integrated estimating. And then down here for bid management, if you have standalone bid management, there are 3 or 4 out there: Building Connected, Builder Train, and Smart Bid, or Builder Trend and Smart Bid are standalone products. So you can send your bids out from your estimating product, usually in Excel format, get them into Building Connected, Builder Trend, or Smart Bid, and then have an invitation to bid sent out and track the bid management process there. And then for proposal generation, again, more of a standalone product, if your estimating product doesn't have it built in, are these other products, Proposify and Field Pulse. There's some other ones as well. But the point is, I'm not going to have an error, from a calculation. If I'm using an item in a spreadsheet, anything can happen. If I've got an item in one of these other databases, I can have all kinds of things embedded in it that are not going to be subject to the whim of me moving a column around in a spreadsheet or hitting a cell and putting in the wrong formula. So for example, an item can have, it can have a waste factor, it can have labor, material, sub-equipment, costs associated with it. It can have a conversion factor. It can have a markup amount. So all those things are stored in a database that whenever you start a new estimate, you're basically taking a snapshot of that estimate. And then from that point forward, that each new estimate has a life of its own. So I'm going to take a couple minutes and just take you into another product. And I want to show you a product. This is actually called ProEst, but there's several of them out there that work in a similar fashion. And so what we've got here is I've started an estimate, 20th at Northwest Pettygrove. And right now my estimate is totally zero. I haven't done any takeoff. I haven't done anything to this job other than to set up my summary page with my markups and my add-ons and my profit margin and things of that nature. What I want to do now though, and notice over here on the right-hand side, I actually have a drawing, which is now displayed in the middle of the screen. So if this was multiple pages, it would be multiple thumbnails of estimates along here. So I just tried to keep it simple and keep the screens clean today so that you all could see them. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to do a new takeoff. So I'm going to just start typing wall. And what I want to do is I want to, I don't know, let's do a light gauge 3 5/8 metal stud wall. Now, while I'm looking at this database, notice that I have 2 different things. Let's do the structural one. But so I have an individual item called 30-inch wall pipe, or I have an assembly, which is essentially a group of related items that can be taken off at the same time. So instead of having to go build all the components every time of what might make that wall up, I've already done it. I've done it once. And so what I'm going to do is select that. And you'll notice over here on the left-hand side, it's asking me for 3 questions. Before I do that, I want to create a sort type. You don't have to do this, but they're usually, and one of the great things about these real estimating solutions is, as opposed to a spreadsheet, is you can build all these sorting options into it. So maybe I need to track it by location because I'm going to stage the work by floor. but I want to know my total cost when I buy the material. Or maybe I just want to see it to present it to an owner in CSI order or whatever. Or maybe I have a schedule of values I want to create after this job is awarded, and I want it to go into my construction management and accounting system. Maybe I have a change order. So you get the idea. There are multiple ways to actually track these. So I'm gonna put this in the exterior or interior or whatever the case may be. Let's just put this in building 1. And now you notice that I have a crosshair on the screen. I've already scaled this drawing. It's 8th scale, but if I didn't, I would simply go to scale and select scale, or have it calculate the scale for me by inputting 2 known points and telling it the difference. What I want to do first is I want to just go ahead and I'm going to start picking up these stud walls. And so I'm just going to do, I'm not going to do a lot because you all will get the idea. And it's difficult to do on a trackball, so forgive me if I'm a little shaky. Now I'm going to pick this up and so on. So now I have 348.70 lineal feet of stud wall. My wall length's 174.35 lineal feet. I'm simply going to enter in a wall height and a stud spacing. So since these are metal studs, maybe I'm going 24-inch. So now my zero estimate has now gone to $14,000. And if you'll notice down here, I've got crew hours. If you do things by man hours and crew days, I've got the overall size of the structure, which I put in before. Right now, my total cost estimate is 14 cents a square foot based on 69,600 square feet of the structure and a total of 20 cents a foot, including all my markups and add-ons. My margin right now is at 25%. So I'm good with that. Let's do another quick takeoff. And let's do a slab. So let's do a 6-inch slab on grade. And now I'm going to get a different set of questions. And let's just say I need to cut out this area right here, or I need to pour this area. And I'll just take it on down. Sorry. All right, so that was 200 square feet. Let's say I know my perimeter, I could simply measure it again. Let's say that's 80 feet. Oh, it wants me to do it, sorry. So that's 83 feet, and my slab base depth, we'll say I've got 6 inches of ROC or some kind of compacted fill. So now I'm up to $17,500 for this particular estimate. And I can simply look at that now different ways. So now I've got essentially a spreadsheet that's been sorted by location is one option. I could sort it by division. So I can actually see what my division prices are. I could see that I have $95 from my database in here from my 3,500 PSI concrete. Around where I live now, it's about $135. So now I've updated that estimate by simply changing it. Now, I did not change it in the database unless I want it to. It only changed it in my estimate. And now I can simply go look at the summary. And I can see that I've got my material markups and my subtotal. I've got my indirects for labor, burden, and equipment and profit. And if I were to bid this job right now, I would be at $17,800. So I didn't have to think about anything but takeoff. Everything else was done for me. I now have bill of materials. I have costs sorted multiple ways. And if I was ready to, and I do bid out any of the work, I could certainly simply go here to the invitations to bid, pick the subs that I want to pick. Or if I work with the same people over and over again, I can actually have them built into the job. So every time I start up, I have my preferred vendors already in there. So I don't even have to come in here and select them again. At this point, I'd select them. It would send an electronic invitation to each one of my subs with the scope of work and attach the plans with it. So when I open that email up, I can actually use you get a sign on, they'll get a sign on into the takeoff tool. So the sub can actually open the plans and do the takeoff right from the plans that came directly from me, and then submit an electronic bid, which then I can analyze. So basically what we've got here is we've incorporated in one tool, as I said earlier, a takeoff methodology, a database, and if I want to go into the reports, then you can see that I have multiple ways to prepare and send my estimate. So here we have my estimate unit cost without any grouping. Again, I could group these however I wanted it to. So by CSI division with my totals page, or one more quick sort if I wanted to do it by bill of materials or by assemblies. Now I've got everything broken down. Could have been by physical location, since I'm ordering material, let's say in multiple phases. I might need to know the concrete for phase 1 versus phase 2 and be able to account for price increases and things like that. So at this point, the last piece, just for an integrated system, would be to show that you could go into a integration and you could simply turn on the integration between the estimating and Acumatica, Foundation, Computer East, Dexter, and Cheney. All these are different products that the estimating solution can give to the accounting product, a schedule of values, all the labor, equipment, material, detail, units, and dollars. So that's just a little bit of a taste of how you might be able to incorporate and automate the estimating process. So just kind of to summarize, and then we're going to take some questions. This really isn't very complicated. It's very complicated, but it's not complicated. Use your tools that you've got, define your business, understand it, find more, and estimate better. Know your ideal job. Have what makes your company different story ready to roll and become great at telling it. Again, I think people really do want to know your story, and it shouldn't be only about the bottom line. It should be about relationships and methodologies and things that you bring to the table. You got to do the work, though. You can't perform badly, or that's going to be that's the killer. You got to do that work. And unfortunately, there's no silver bullet. All these systems take a little time to learn, but once you learn them, they give you time back. So there is a little bit of that in it, but once you start telling your story, it takes a while to become the go-to that everybody wants to use on their jobs. And then the last piece is, just like football, repetitions. You got to put in the time and execute, execute, execute. So I know that was a lot of information. I know it was pretty quick in 45 minutes. I think we're going to open it up for some questions. And Megan, do we have any questions from the group?
We do. So the first one we have is, are there any systems that combine these features, such as job costing and CRM?
Yes, there are. Let me just go. There are several that come with CRM already part of the system. The only one I know for construction is called Acumatica. So it does have a CRM built in where you can actually track opportunities and leads and see them as part of your backlog if they become an order. And you can create and convert opportunities directly into jobs, so you don't have to do any extra work. There are several other CRM packages, though, that do have different and varying integrations to other softwares for doing the construction accounting and project management. So there's one called Top Builder. There's one out there called Cosential. Both of those have integrations to the Viewpoint products. So they're certainly worth looking at. And so the only one I know of that has it integrated as part of their solution is Acumatica.
Perfect. And then we have another question. This one's kind of long, but it's kind of a two-parter. So it starts off and it says, how can we take our estimating out of Excel based into a true system? Would it require that we reset how we do what we do, or can we use the same methodology of estimating and still use a system?
So I'll give you a two-part answer on that.
Perfect.
One part would be converting your items that you currently track in Excel into an estimating product. In other words, taking that database and putting it in a new database, or converting it to a new database. And most of the estimating vendors offer those services. So they can take your item list, your assemblies and work packages, and build them for you in their solution. So that's number one. Number two, I would say that the answer would be, I would have to see what you think is different about your process, or we need to know what would be different about your process. If you basically sit down with a PDF or a set of plans, do a plan review, then perform the takeoff process, and then, start looking at reprices based on actual quantities from the quantity survey. If you do all that, you probably don't have to learn anything new. But if there's something unique about the way you do a takeoff now, I would say that if we got our eyeballs on it, we could see if there was any real transition or differences required to move to a new estimating product.
Perfect. And yeah, those were some of our main questions. We had about 2 others that were almost the exact same as those, so I'm not going to repeat them. But if you guys do have any more questions throughout this, I know a couple of people have asked if we're going to be sharing copies of the PowerPoint presentation. Yes, and we will also be sending out a recording of this webinar as well. And following that, just want to thank Vernon Thomas at American Subcontractors Association. He's with the Georgia chapter, so we partnered with him on this as well. We're really trying to get an outreach to a lot of different people really just within the subcontractor world and contractor world. So there will be a part 2 to this as well. We'll be covering a separate topic, so be on the lookout for that. I believe, I want to say sometime in November. So be on the lookout for that. And following this, we will be sharing all the information with you guys. So thank you so much, Pat. This was fantastic. And if anybody has any questions, we will provide our contact information and y'all can shoot us an email.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. All right. You guys have a great one.